Hey guys, welcome back to the Sweet Ever After. This is the last episode for this season of this mini podcast series that I've been so blessed to do with my beautiful, wonderful wife, Sydney. How are you, babe?
I'm good. How are you, babe?
I'm, doing good. So we are joined by some very special guests today, and this is a very special episode, and excited to have Dr. Doug Stringer and Lisa Stringer with us today on this episode. So thank you guys for being with us. Welcome. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be with you
Now,
guys.
if you don't know, I'm sure many of you probably do know Doug. I feel like everybody knows Doug. That's one of the things where I was like, oh, you know, yeah, I know Doug too. But Doug's definitely been a spiritual father, mentor in my life. Him and Lisa both just a couple that we've been able to watch over the years and glean so much wisdom from. So we so appreciate you guys, and thank you for taking the time just to be here. I know your schedule is crazy because scheduling this was crazy. Just trying to get in. Yeah, we're not in the country. Oh, we're back in the country. No, so I know God's doing amazing work through Somebody Cares and just everything you guys are involved with. So that's awesome, including y'all's daughters, music, and all that stuff. So just awesome stuff that you guys are doing. But we're glad you're here. And the topic today for this last episode is in sickness and in health, and just talking about how do we handle, being sick. Going through, and I don't mean just the cold or even what I've got right now, allergies, but I mean serious health issues that we will face through the course of our life, whether it's autoimmune diseases, things like cancer, which you guys have experience with. We're going to hear about, those really daunting diagnoses. How do we stay close? How do we get through these things together and don't let it pull us apart, but rather grow closer through it, even as these things are coming against us, right? These real life situations. And I don't want to take too much time even setting it up more than that. You guys have an incredible story. I know, Doug, at one point you were diagnosed with cancer. It was a crazy diagnosis. I remember many of us that were around you at the time were praying, and it was wild. It also encouraged me to work out because I remember seeing you going through chemo, hooked up to all this stuff, working out, and I was like, I'm sitting on the couch like, what am I doing? I was like, I need to do something. I was like, I have no excuse. But the way God showed up in the midst of that, and Lisa, I know you wrote a book on the topic, which we'll link in the description here on this post that you can check out. I highly recommend it. But I just want to kind of open it up. You guys share that story of what it was like walking through that, kind of what happened, and then just how you stayed close together in the midst of it, and how ultimately you came through it better than what you went into it with.
I'm going to let Lisa share some of her perspective because she wrote about it, obviously.
Yeah.
But, I think about it, and I wrote this down, really, the sweet ever after, and also about relationship.
Yeah.
It's really, what does love look like?
Yeah.
A lot of people think of love in different aspects, and I won't get into the breakdown of, agape versus, phileo and those.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is that, I learned that from Dr. Edwin Lewis Cole, the founder of the Christian Men's Network, love desires to give at the expense of oneself.
Yeah.
Most of what the world calls love is lust. Lust desires to get at the expense of
What can I
others.
get? Yeah.
But love desires to give. And that's really, when I think about it, what does love look like? It really became real and tangible to me. And watching my wife and daughter and friends and others rally around to intercede and pray for me in the midst of what I was going through. And so, Lisa, I'll let you take it away from when we first got the diagnosis, because your perspective, as we were in the vehicle in our driveway, when I got the call.
Well, Doug got a phone call, and I heard him say, "Yes, doctor." I was cooking in the kitchen. We had just, like you said, we were always on the road, and it wasn't an option to ask him, "Can I get in the car with you?" Because we had really poor reception in our home.
Yeah.
He goes out to the car, and I just hop in the car with him, and he's looking straight away, and I hear everything like, "How bad is it? And what does it mean?" And I'm thinking to myself, how bad is what? But how bad is what doesn't
what's
happen
going
to
on?
people
What are
that
we
pray?
talking about?
Exactly. I mean,
What do you mean?
Exactly. Like, wait a minute, we're the ones going to the hospital praying
Yeah.
for you when you're,
Yeah.
about to enter into the portals of eternity. And
Yeah.
we're the ones praying and believing for things. So it's not supposed to happen to us.
Yeah.
It also doesn't happen to people that are trying to eat right, exercise right.
Yeah.
None of those things happen. But guess what? Reality is it happens to everyone.
Yeah.
No one is exempt from these challenges.
Yeah.
And getting back to your initial point of you were talking about covenant in the
Yeah.
beginning, like,
Yeah.
in sickness and in health.
Yeah.
When you're standing before your loved one and you're saying in sickness and in health, man, you believe you mean it.
Yeah.
and you think you're going to walk through it, but
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people we sat in waiting rooms to see doctors that we would minister to them or just let them talk, and they were left alone, and they told us their spouse left them because they couldn't handle what they were going through.
Yeah.
And I can look at you now, baby, and say, you were not going to get rid of me for anything. I don't care
right.
what went down. And even y'all were talking about, potential fights because that
Yeah.
happens.
Oh, yeah.
Life happens in
Yes.
marriages. The difference is what kept us together is Jesus.
Yeah.
Bottom line, it's all
Well,
Jesus.
let me kind of go back to your point too. Is that when I went to the car, reason I had to look straight ahead because I could find myself almost wanting to choke up, but I wanted to be strong for my wife.
Yeah.
And so basically, what happened was I had a lump growing in my side of my face and my neck. It started to grow, and then another one. And so we were actually ministering in New England when I first noticed it and called some doctor friends. They said, Doug, you ought to probably go get a biopsy. And so we went and got a biopsy at ENT here near Clear Lake.
Yeah.
And the doctor called that Friday and said, I normally would not call you on the phone for this. I would have you make an appointment.
Yeah.
But because it's 80% aggressive B-cell lymphoma cancer, it is moving quickly. I
Yeah.
need you to get into the system as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So I need you to go on Monday first thing to get into the MD Anderson system. And so that was the kind of the urgency. So I felt that urgency.
Yeah.
And so I saw Lisa getting teary-eyed. And so when I got off the phone with the doctor, I said to Lisa, Lisa, go in the house, get communion cups ready, get my mother-in-law, her mom, and our daughter together. Let me go have some time. And I went and found a grocery store parking lot and sat there for over two and a half hours. They're probably desperate. What's going on? I get home. We gather together in the living room. And the first thing I said, if we're going to get through this, first thing we have to know is God did not do this to me.
Yeah.
And number two, if God did not do this to me, it does not belong to me.
Yeah. Amen.
And if it does not belong to me, it cannot be about me or us.
Yeah.
It will become a ministry we did not ask for, but it will be a ministry nonetheless. We have to get it out of us and looking into how we can minister to people
Yeah.
in the process. And,
Yeah, that's good.
and Lisa kind of explained all that in her book, God did not do this to me.
Yeah.
Right. So what got us through it is warfare
Yeah.
on our knees. Worship is warfare.
Yeah.
And so I went back inside, as he said, and I did exactly what any other human would do.
Yeah.
I started to cry.
Yeah.
And I cried. I mean, I just needed tissue and tissue
Yeah.
and tissue. Didn't know where he was. Heartbroken for the fact that he was contending with this processing by himself,
Yeah.
which he needed to do,
Yeah.
just like I needed to do. And then after that moment of so much crying, common sense is go get his Bible, because I was in our bedroom and
Yeah.
I wanted his Bible, and I
Yeah.
got his Bible and I began to read the word. And then, if you look at even Psalm 23 or the Lord is my shepherd, I began to say the Lord is Doug's shepherd. The
Yeah.
Lord is Lisa's shepherd,
Yeah.
and
Personal.
made it
Yeah.
very, very personal.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden I had just this righteousness
Yeah.
inside of me arise and say, he will live and not
Faith.
die. I
Yeah.
don't know what the,
Yeah.
full
Yeah.
diagnosis,
Yeah.
but you will not
Yeah.
on my watch,
Yes.
baby.
Yeah.
And
right.
that's knowing that you have to contend even into the end, and then you also have to know that everybody's story is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't know God's will.
Yeah.
For some, it is to enter into the time with Him forever.
Yeah.
But the key is fight until your last breath,
Yeah.
and trust Him no matter what the outcome
Yeah.
is. I will tell you, I vacillated back and forth. So in that mist of strength, I also went back to moments of weakness.
Yeah. Well,
and
yeah.
you know,
Normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Matt and Sydney, which she brought up a good point, because even going through the chemo, because I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
It was actually, and Lisa can tell you this, where she looked at me and says, no, you're going to do this.
No, you're doing it.
I'm going to do the natural stuff and you're going to do this.
Like,
you
You know?
do-
I
you do
acknowledge
all
your
this.
feelings,
Yeah, right, right.
You
but
do all
we're
this
going to
stuff.
do this.
But during that time, there was another couple good pastor friends of mine going to MD Anderson at the same time.
I remember this.
And going through that. They've both entered into the portals of eternity with the Lord, since then. So everybody's story is different. And Lisa
Yeah.
brought that up. Everybody's story is different. But I had to come to the conclusion for me, if I have 1 day, 1 week, 1 year, 10 more years, or 100 more years,
Yeah.
I had to survive. I had to live every day by the grace of God gave me. And I was going
Yeah.
to continue to minister the gospel by the grace He gave me. So I had
Yeah.
responsibilities all that year
Yeah.
for all kinds of major prayer events all across the country
Yeah.
and evangelism and things like that. And I thought, well, how am I going to do that? By the grace of God, we were going to do what we
Yeah.
could. And Lisa was such a trooper with me. And Ashley would come in when I was getting my treatments off the road, come back to MD Anderson. Ashley would bring her guitar and sing over me. People come
awesome.
Yeah, I
communion.
remember all the videos.
And
everything.
every nurse every doctor, every PA, anybody that came in, before I would allow them to touch me or put any chemo in me, I would say this is going through the blood of Jesus and ask them if they would take communion with us. So
Yeah.
That's
there was a
awesome.
whole journey process that Lisa can kind of share too.
One of the things I was just listening to you guys share the story, and I remember now, I'm like remembering different moments of when I remember being at some events that you still did. And I remember asking Mike, Rosas, which I went to a lot of the events with that you were putting on, and prayer events. And I'd be like, I can't believe he's still doing this. Like he's like up there, obviously. And at the time, you're totally bald, the hair was gone from all the chemo. And just seeing you guys, I remember watching that thing, just seeing, it inspired so much faith, which you may not even realize. I'm sure people have shared these stories with you, but it inspired so much faith of people that said, look, even when I'm going through something tough. And that was one of the things, even looking at you, say, man, he really loves Jesus. Like, that's just
Right.
clear. They love Jesus, and they love each other. So that was the thing, was apparent, was y'all's love for each other and your love for the Lord was so on display. But something you mentioned, Doug, and I've experienced, again, not in the same extreme sense of cancer, but, when you do personally, as men, I think our tendency is we want to protect, we want to provide, that's just innate in us, and we don't want to put stress on our family. And so then when you get something like that, that's like, I'm going to need help. And it's so hard for you even to deal with that. And I hear that in your story, even as you were processing it, like, you didn't even want to tell anybody at first. You didn't want to I just need to, what are we going to do? Because,
Right.
you don't want to put that on your family. And I think a lot of men going through that kind of stuff, they feel, I feel like it's a different level, because for, like, obviously when Sydney's going through something, my natural thing is to protect her, to care for her, to take care of her. And even though I'd rather it be happening to me than her, I'm still like, well, I can help fix things. I can really take, but then when it's like, I'm the one that needs the help, I'm like, you don't want to ask for that help. You don't want to see them struggle. You don't want to see them carry that burden. And so that's just a different level, I feel like, as men, that we have to deal with at times, is to be able to receive that help, and so I just seeing that struggle, that dynamic, I know that had to have been tough.
Well, and Sydney, you'd appreciate this too, and Lisa and I have talked about this a lot. Men God innately gave us the gift to be strength givers.
Yeah.
Women, God has given the gift to be life givers.
Oh, yeah.
And so our wives want to make sure that they're speaking life into us. They're giving us life. I know it wasn't easy for Lisa in retrospect now, and when she wrote her manuscript, I couldn't read it because I'd lose it.
Yeah.
And but during that process, there were moments where I was trying to be strong. I was trying to be, I can do this, and she was trying to be helpful, and I became hurtful instead of helpful.
Yeah.
At least you can give a couple of stories like that. In fact, when you were cleaning out my PICC line, I think, or something.
Yeah, that was I
what
was
a
just
joy.
thinking of that already. Exactly. I remember the exact place I was sitting. So I had to take all these classes because, again, we're fighting for his life. All
Yeah.
these classes on how to clean out the PICC line. And anybody who knows Doug, he's a stickler for like hygiene and cleanliness and order. And so you have to clean this, and they scare the EBGBs out of you when you go take these classes. If you do anything wrong, you could cause an infection. An infection could cause him to lose his life. And you're like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, that's a lot.
and it's a lot. And so I'll never forget one day in the dining room table, cleaning the whole place out. It is a process, man. It's like a recipe. You're baking and you have all these things in order. And he's like, did you clean your hands right? He's already in a bad mood, in my opinion. My perception is the dude's in a bad mood. He's got, he's probably
There's some things going on.
I was fearful, but didn't want to show I was fearful.
Yeah, right.
I
You're
was
just-
tough, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff. And so anyhow, all I saw was attitude. And I'm like, bless you in the name of Jesus. I'm not murmuring, It's like inside you're having to process all those things. And I start doing it, and he's like, I don't think you're doing it right. And he's short with me. He's very curt, and you have to give him the grace because that's not who Doug is.
Yeah.
He didn't mean that. He doesn't even maybe realize. And
Yeah.
so those were things that as the caregiver, whomever you are,
Yeah.
you have to process.
Yeah.
And you want to give them that grace. And so I remember doing the whole thing, and the whole time I am fighting back the tears because I'm physically exhausted, I'm mentally exhausted, I'm trying to figure out how financially God's going to make this happen.
Yeah.
So there's all these things, and you're still trying to manage the family, pay the bills, do ministry and everything else, and it's
she was
hard.
traveling with me and still traveling at the same time.
I was his traveling nurse because he had to be cleaned out every single day.
Well,
And-
you also had to make sure how much coffee he was actually drinking.
oh, everything because
no sugar.
And that's one of the things
it
I think
down.
a lot of people that, I saw them at the hospital. I even offered when I'd see somebody sitting by himself, I said, can I do anything for you? And they said, can you buy me potato chips? I wanted to lecture them on, no, I'm not buying you potato chips. You need to eat right. But I'm not their mama. And so
Yeah.
there I went to the vending machine to buy them potato chips. Back to the Doug thing, though, there were a couple times that I remember. One, in fact, he came home, and I rarely had those things in the house, the potato chips. But I had some hidden because guess what? Mama wanted
Yeah.
some
I
potato
need some
chips.
You need some comfort stuff
That was
sometimes.
my-
Okay, you're going
I
through
needed some
stuff.
salty
Okay.
Lays, to be honest
Right.
with you.
Hide
Exactly.
in the pantry, like worry about yourself for 5
Well,
minutes.
I
Like-
hid them in the pantry, then I'd go to the restroom and eat them quietly. I
Yes.
couldn't even crunch them. I had to
Man,
just,
that's tough.
let them just melt in the mouth.
We hide Oreos.
Okay, you get it.
Yeah.
So that day, Doug comes home and he goes to his room and he found my potato chips. And I go into the room to check on him, tell him dinner's going to be ready, and he's chewing away on some potato chips. I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "You're not my mama." And it was something so simple. I don't know how much
I
attitude he
said,
had.
I need you to be my wife, not my mother.
And that hurt me. You would have thought
Yeah.
he shot me in the
Yeah.
leg and I
Yeah.
was in severe pain, but it was my heart that was shattered because at that moment I was just broken inside. I was tired in every way. As you
Yeah.
said, you're putting up
Yeah.
a front. I think we're both trying to put up a front
Yeah,
for
yeah.
each other,
Yeah.
that we're stronger than
Yeah.
the moments that we need to endure. Going back to the Jesus factor.
Yeah.
What kept us, what kept me is being in the Word, having
Yeah.
an accountability person, somebody I could cry with that would not leave me parked at sorrow,
Yes.
but remind me
Yeah.
what the Word
Bring
of
you out of
God
it,
says,
yeah.
that, cry may come in the night, but joy comes in the morning.
Yeah.
I was waiting for that morning,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And so with that, Doug was a little short with me. I remember walking away and going to another restroom in the house, leaning up against the wall. It was a scene out of a movie. And I'm leaning up against the wall and I'm just bawling in quiet because I also can't let our daughter hear that
Yeah,
I'm hurt
that's
and
hard.
what's going on.
Yeah.
And I remember just my back, I just slowly fell down the wall and I said, God, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I don't have it in me to do it. And that's where the intercession of the righteous availeth much.
Yeah.
The Bible says. I believe that your prayers, Sydney, your prayers, Matt, I believe God had y'all praying at the
Yeah.
exact moments that we needed it.
Yeah.
And that's what allowed me to get up off the floor, sustain myself, clean my tears, and go back and feed my man of God his dinner and
Yeah.
act like nothing happened.
Yeah.
Even though, truthfully, in a normal place, I'd just give you the silent treatment for a few hours.
Yes. Well, you're
I
gonna
might
pay
think
for this one.
like Matt might have gotten
it.
throat
Yeah, that might
chopped
have
a few times.
Cancer wouldn't have been what did me in.
It would have been.
It was getting stabbed.
I'm like, what did you say?
How so the cancer got him? No, it was my wife.
Yeah, exactly. But he deserved it. And so those were the hard things because you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of times I wanted to give him a few pieces of my mind,
Yeah.
but it was the Jesus fact that I knew I couldn't, and who I gave it to was my one accountability person. I didn't need to have 3 or 4. You don't
Yeah.
need to gossip about your spouse.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't need to have a tribe. I think that needs to be a very intimate moment with somebody that will let you just speak out,
Yeah.
speak life back into you, let you come to your senses, and always end it in prayer. Start
Yeah.
in prayer and end in prayer.
Yeah.
That way, God's in the midst of it all.
Yeah. I think that's so important. One of the things you just hit on is the fact that we have people around us that aren't just for us, but they're for our marriage, first and foremost, that their main goal is that we remain married, that we remain healthy together, and
Amen.
that they're for us. And we're blessed to have several friends around us that are for our marriage, just like what
Right.
you said. But having that one person you can really confide in that'll let you, vent
Right.
the stuff, but then we'll bring it back to a heavenly perspective and call
Well,
you
even
out of
like
it.
Yes.
that you can share like those ugly feelings too to just get them out, but then they bring you back to reality and like speak life back into you, but they
That's
give you
right.
that space
That's right.
to let that all out. Like I think that's really
One
really
of the
good.
things that we do, we talk about everything we do in ministry or even with each other. Communication is the key to life. So we know that's a key to life. So we need to
Yeah.
make sure that if there's not proper communication, there has to be a way of communicating.
Yeah.
Emotion, feeling. But we always start with the positive, go through the ugly, and end with the positive.
Yeah.
And we found out recently from a rabbi, in fact, Lisa brought up earlier about this rabbi that's an Orthodox rabbi from Israel that really loves us. He heard about what was happening, and he was in Houston visiting family, saw us at the Jewish Community Center at a concert, beelines it across the concert hall, sees me. This is an Orthodox rabbi, the long beard, the whole bit,
Yeah.
right? He comes up and he goes, and he asked me, what is your mother's maiden name? I told him. He goes, and your full name? I told him. He goes, John Douglas, because that's my first name is John.
Yeah.
John Douglas, son of Ayako Ide. You shall live and you shall not. He started prophesying to me like this
That's awesome.
Pentecostal preacher, thinking, oh my gosh.
Well.
But in the midst of all that, we had to be determined that we were going to make sure that we start with the positive, talk reality, but always end with the positive. Now, everybody, like she said, every story is different.
Yeah.
So we don't project what we went through on others.
Yeah.
But we had to process ourselves. And Lisa got so many messages from people saying, don't do chemo and don't do this. We get that. For some,
I remember seeing the Facebook posts. Anytime you post anything, oh, this is all that.
everybody said, but we had to find our way of the natural, the spiritual, and what we felt like at that moment when I said I could postpone the chemo, and she looked at me that day and said, no, I think you need to start today.
Oh, there was no I think. You were going to. There was no thinking involved.
No.
Jesus spoke. That's right.
But I think it makes me. It reminds me of the fact that when you get married, when you make a covenant with someone, and you're saying, okay, forever till death do us part, right? And you really mean it, right? Every decision you make, you have to consider the whole. And so even Doug saying, well, I don't think I need to start right now. It's like, well, no, the other half of you is saying, no, we're starting right now.
I love the way you put that.
So like, that's the thing we have to remember is like, it's not just you anymore.
Yeah.
And that's in the good times and the bad times. And when the times when you feel like you want to take control, it's like, well, you still have a whole nother half you have to consider before you make a decision. And especially when it concerns your wife, your daughter, what it means to them, because, and nobody at that point, I mean, including myself, were ready to lose Doug Stringer. So, there was a lot of that I remember praying and being like, Lord, maybe this is selfish, but I haven't been able to spend enough time with him. So no.
I love that, Matt, because there is a story I talk about in the book about his spiritual son who we didn't know that he was a spiritual son. Mm-hmm. But he said, you became my spiritual father from afar. I lost my natural father at 18. Wow. God gave him a dream. And in the dream, he told him to intercede for Doug Stringer because there were enough fathers that were lost and there was a need.
For 40 days.
And on the last day of his fast was the day we found out, one, that he was fasting for Doug and for the family and for spiritual fathers. And it was the day we found out that he had been free and clear of cancer.
Wow.
And there was no more evidence of disease at that moment. And in Jesus' name, never again.
Yeah.
Never
definitely
again.
not a coincidence, that's for sure.
Well, we have a mutual friend, too, that Kurt Williams.
Yeah.
When he actually called me and says, I will kill you if you leave before you're supposed to go.
Kurt just shared that. We had lunch like 2 weeks ago. He just shared that story with me that he called you and said, I'll kill you. I'll kill you if you die.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, we do. We have to have that tribe around us supporting us. And so here's something I'm kind of curious of too, is because obviously in the moment, there was a lot of things that you did. You had to kind of put on the back burner. You had to just deal with, right? You get yourself say, hey, I can't, right now is not the time to deal with it. But after, right, once you get the all clear, what was that process? What did that look like where you actually, because I'm sure you guys did have to kind of revisit some of the things that were kind of put on the back burner back here of how you felt and how just decompressing through all that. What did that look like for y'all? Like, I mean, just in your relationship.
I remember the moment because I had already in the middle of, again, traveling, doing these prayer gatherings and outreaches, but I was also helping a church going through a time of transition and a desperate time. And so spending a lot of time there, even through the midst of all this. And when it was over, we were after church one day on the other side of town. We're driving, stop at a coffee shop. I said, what's wrong? And she's crying. And she just said, I need my husband back. Yeah. You can tell that moment because I remember that hit me. And as a result, we realized both of us needed a break from everything we've been through.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I felt like throughout the whole process, Doug never stopped serving the Lord.
No.
I mean, he was full on. He was wearing me out, y'all. And that was a moment where it wasn't about me. Like you said, it was about God. And
it was
what
my
God
survival
was
instinct, though. I had to keep focus on
That's
the
how
Lord.
he was dealing with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I respect that. But the spouse has to pay the price.
Yeah.
I could not, if I thought I was tired, dare I not compare myself to being injected with poison.
Yeah.
All the time, let alone eating all these things that I told him I was making and that were healthy that I knew most of them were like, ugh, disgusting.
Gross.
And I told them, you will eat it and you will like it.
Do not complain.
Exactly. You are not a child. I'll pow you. And so.
And there's still a sign in the kitchen that says, you will eat it and you will like it. So.
Yeah, they're inside little jokes that are beyond what the message is.
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, it was very trying times. And so I was tired. He never stopped working. He never stopped serving. Some people would actually irritate me because they were pulling on him so hard.
Yeah.
But yet I knew that God forgive me for feeling irritated when that was our call.
Yeah.
You understand? That's the mission. You all as pastors
Yeah.
and so many other leaders that are pastoring, that's our call. And it's just the price we have to pay. And so I remember just being physically, mentally exhausted. I felt like even in our drive times, a lot of times as you drive in the car, as couples, that's your time to talk.
Yeah.
There's no child pulling at you. And so often, because we are so busy, the time in the car is Doug's time on his phone. So I don't always get him.
Yeah.
And I think I was done not having him.
hard.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
having to be with him. And so I just said, I want my husband back, meaning, when can we have us time? And so that was a reality. And I think that's what it took for him to see the need as the spouse, as
Yeah.
the alpha, as the priest of our home, to realize,
Yeah.
you know what? She's right. I need to slow down and give her husband back.
Yeah.
And then we can move forward.
Yeah.
We need to address where we're exhausted, address where we're mentally depleted, and,
Yeah.
and then we need to pour into each other for
yeah.
a minute. And God did something because he obeyed.
Yeah.
And I don't mean me, he obeyed God by
Yeah.
realizing that the covenant he made with me and that I had to become number one before ministry.
Yeah, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I think there's many times, where Sydney has called out things that, it is. And just like you said, he obeyed God. But yeah, God was using my wife in that moment to call me to attention
Right.
that I was in the wrong and I needed to stop what I was doing, slow down and address it. One of the things that we have, which is essentially what you did, is we have a rule, within our own marriage with ministry, because as you said, ministry it's all consuming. People they'll be pulling on you. You're having the worst day of your life. It doesn't matter. Somebody, doesn't care, and they they need you right now to do what they need you to do. And one of the things Sydney says is, she says, I call marriage. And
So I have that little card in my pocket.
yeah.
I can
It's
throw
been a
around.
long.
Yeah.
I see, and I feel good because I feel like I'm doing a great job, because she hasn't played that card in a very long time. So,
It's either we're moving to Alaska or I'm going to play the marriage
but
card.
one of the things he said, even when we started the church, and especially when it started to grow and get really, really busy, and I made it clear to her over and over again. I said, hey, if there's ever a time you can't do this and you feel like you're going to just leave, I said, I'll leave with you. Just tell me when. We'll go. We'll leave it all. I was like, because I cannot lose my marriage.
Amen.
And so that being that, and her having that ability to say, I need you here now. I need you to say no to this. And everything within me, and obviously, and Doug, more so, it's like you want to say yes to everything. Like, opportunity to go, I'll go, Lord, send me. That's your heart.
I'm like, no. And Matt's like,
No.
maybe say yes every now and then. I'm like, okay, balance.
Maybe we say yes.
So what I had to learn is that she'll say yes, yes, yes if she gets to go with me.
Yeah. Well, no, and that's wonderful. I'm glad you guys travel together so much. It's so important, especially during that season when y'all going through that. She would be with you, of course, and also I know to monitor his coffee intake and trying to grab some sweets or something.
Yes.
And this guy,
Yes.
party animal. I'm
Yes.
like 3 a.m. He's like, hey, you want to meet in the hotel lobby? I'm like, have you gone to bed yet? No, I got
He
coffee.
texted me that one time. He was like, I'm having coffee with Doug. I was like, it's like 3 in the morning.
I was like, yeah, we're out here, man.
Y'all are
It's a
wild.
real rager.
These are heroes of the faith. That's how they roll.
At least we're drinking coffee.
Yeah, right. That was the thing. You want to meet for coffee? I was like, sure. I don't need to go to bed. You don't have a
That's
9
it.
a.m. session. That's fine.
That's right.
No, just incredible. Again, you guys' stories inspire me so much. And so the last thing I really kind of want to close with is just from both of you, what would you tell a couple that they are walking through some serious health issues? One of the spouse is walking through something tough, like a daunting diagnosis of stage 4 cancer. What would be your advice to them that you'd say, hey, this, before everything else, this right here, hold on to this? What would that be?
Communion with the Lord. So that means don't let anything get before you and the Word, you and your praise, and then communion with your spouse in the sense that not just the fellowship, but we actually took the communion cup every single day. And the reason that's important is
And even if we weren't together or with the family, we'd do it via FaceTime or
Yeah, I remember that.
calls.
Yeah,
We do
because
it.
the Word of God says, don't take it lightly.
Yeah.
So for us to take communion meant that if I was irritated with him, I had to come before God and say, God, I'm sorry. Doug, I'm sorry. And then let's take communion together.
Yeah.
And that gave us a fresh start. And I think that brought us so close together. And I think that put the Lord at the center. And we didn't just do it together. If any of you all have kids that are living in your house, it's about the entire household. You don't want any breach in the home. And so everybody aligned. And I think that was priceless for us.
Oh.
And for me, I think it's a matter of, as we've been conversing here, that we have to be, it's an intentionality.
Yeah.
That it's not always what you feel, but you have to have intentionality of doing what is right.
Yeah.
First with God, then with your spouse, and then with others.
Yeah.
So even for example, when I was asked to do weddings during that whole time.
Yeah.
Losing my hair. One night I woke up on July 3rd that year, and I was losing my hair and had to speak on July 4th, and then do a wedding on July 5th.
Yeah.
And I woke up, and you have to have humor too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy laugh.
Yeah, you have to, because merry heart does good like medicine, right? And so I woke up that July 3rd, said, honey, she's freaking out. What, are you okay? I go, the eagle is balding. The eagle. I was losing all my hair.
I remember that. I remember that article. Yeah.
And so, but I would remind my family and others around me, if we go to do a wedding or going to be a part of something or someone's even funeral, if people are going to come up because they love us and say, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And I would always defer and say, tonight, this is not the right place. This is to celebrate this person or
Yeah.
to celebrate this wedding. So we want to make sure we did not bring the attention to ourselves. So there's intentionality, and then there's an importance of communication, which is a key that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
When he was balding, just a funny side note, he wakes me up because he's still up at 3 a.m.
Yeah, of course.
I knew he was balding. I loved him so much that every day I was washing the bedding because I was finding more and more hair in the bedding, body hair, hair that was on his head.
Yeah.
It was all on the sheets, and I'd wake up and I thought, oh no,
Yeah.
because that was a reality check, and I didn't want him to see it. So every day I'd strip the bed and wash it. That's what love looks like.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I got to tell you
Yes.
that after my hair started growing back at the beginning of 2016,
Yeah.
I was doing a gathering, I think in Orlando, for a few hundred pastors that I was speaking at. And then also this pastor who's a moderator is an MMA guy. He does a lot of sparring with MMA fighters to kind of minister to them. He goes to Lisa, he says, and he has got this deep man voice, Lisa, I know you're glad your husband's hair is growing back, but this whole past year, if you didn't know any better, you didn't even know he had cancer. You just looked like a bad ninja dude with no hair.
Doug's ego was like, bam.
Oh yeah. I remember that. I'd be like, yeah, I don't mind it. And I remember every time you would say it too, I'd always look at Lisa's
Yeah, I
face.
was
She'd be like,
stop.
no, we're gonna bring that hair
Like
back.
right now.
That I think what's so beautiful in that and everything you guys just shared, I hope everyone listening really takes this to heart, especially because it's not really if. I mean, I pray no one ever does go through any significant health crisis, but it's more of honestly a when. There's going to be something that pops up. If you're married, if you stay married for many years, you run into something at some point. But the beautiful thing you mentioned is things that he probably wasn't even aware of. Right, you were doing, and vice versa. I'm sure there's times you've done things that she wasn't even aware of. It reminds me of a time they diagnosed me. I was having really bad acid reflux, but they did this whole thing, and they said they basically said, "Oh, we think you have Barrett's esophagus," which means basically cancer of the esophagus. Which obviously at the time I just started really preaching, pastoring, all that stuff. I'm like, "Oh, great! I'm not gonna be able to talk. That's awesome." And I remember during that time it was like a week. They basically said, "Yeah, we're gonna do this test. It doesn't look good though. We're gonna take a biopsy." So they took the biopsy. They're like, we'll let you know in about a week. I was like, oh, cool. And so I was young too. I think it was like 23, maybe 22. We had only been married for a little while. And Sydney, I remember doing things. She was like, oh, it'll be fine, babe. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Well, what I didn't know is when she would wait for me to fall asleep, and she would weep and just pray over me all night long. She did that for a straight week. Didn't tell me about it. She was fasting. She was praying. And so I get the diagnosis. They call back. They're like, "Oh, we were wrong. It was just irritation. Nothing's wrong." And I was like, "Oh, good." I was like, "Babe, guess what?" And she's like, "What?" I was like, "It's nothing." And she just breaks down, bawling and crying and
I
just
was
praising.
very tired
Yes,
after that.
but yes, just praising God. And I didn't realize. And she shared with me what had been going on in the night and what she'd just been praying for me. And that's so important
right.
that we do that for each other. But even in the moment that we're not telling them, right, it's something we're just interceding for them. We're praying them through because again, we're one. We're covering each other. So, well,
Love that.
Doug, Lisa, thank you so much for being on today's episode. And guys, please check out Lisa's book, God Did Not Do This to Me. We'll link it in the description of the video for you to find it. Doug, of course, also has tons of books you can find. Just an incredible dude. If you've never heard any of his messages or read any of his work, definitely check it out. But guys, thanks again for being here.
It's an honor.
Yep. And until next time.